on stage and you're surrounded by people. But the fact of the matter is, it can be really, after coming from more of a corporate and then I was an entrepreneur with businesses, I decided I needed more. I wanted to be around more people and we wanted to offer more all-encompassing solutions for our clients. So I started Conversionomics. We just celebrated our 10-year anniversary, which is great considering we survived a couple of interesting things that not all businesses survive. I told at one point, Sarah and I were together when COVID hit in 2020. And I said, Sarah, I think we're gonna have to change the name of our company to anything for a buck just to get by. But we didn't, we stuck with Conversionomics. So, and that was one of the reasons, like I said, I had clients that would come to me and say, hey, we really like this, but now we need that. Or what can we do different or better next time? Or sometimes I'm not the perfect fit. And now even more so, we've got 95 speakers on our team. So my goal now is full-time focused on helping our clients get the right solution. So it's something I'm very proud of. The other benefit is it was really nice I have 95 people that I can see how they all run their individual businesses, but yet also how can we provide maybe some additional support that they wouldn't have if they're a one-person show or maybe a one-person show with an admin type of thing. So we're really proud to celebrate our 10-year anniversary, and I feel like this is part of that celebration. So thank you for inviting us to be here today, Steve.
Awesome. All right, well, let's dig in, and I've got some questions prepped, but we just kind of go wherever this goes. And as a podcast host, you kind of go where it takes you. And so, Lynn, why don't we start with you? Just sort of this whole idea of charging a fee. I think again we have people across the spectrum, so I'm trying to make sure we can capture something that helps everybody. But there's different models for speaking. Obviously, there's some people that speak as the primary business. Sometimes they're speaking to gain business from other sources, coaching, consulting, that sort of piece. How do we start thinking about fees depending on our business model? So, Lynn, why don't you kind of take this first one? How should our business, whatever our model is, how should that inform how we think about speaking fees?
Well, and to your point, Steve, they're two very different things. And there's the group, and it's funny because when I'm dealing with clients, I'm constantly trying to help them understand that those are two very different things. Because there are a lot of people that will say, oh, I presented pro bono or I spoke for free. So my background, I'm a sales strategist, just so y'all know. Like a lot of people who run bureaus are more administrative. I'm a sales strategist. So the only people I bring onto the Conversionomics team are people that I know I can sell, meaning I know clients are looking for these topics, that type of a thing. So when you hear me talk about it, I'm very dedicated and committed to sales. And so I think it's really important that you do differentiate your own business, because oftentimes we'll have clients come to us and say, hey, we've got this big, fabulous event. We love one of your speakers, but we pay an exposure, right? Like they're going to be in front of 2,000 people. And so I had somebody recently, a job out in Utah, and they're like, well, usually we talk about budget. They said, well, usually we give them a handwritten thank you card, and which is great, but we're professional speakers. And so I fight that battle on behalf of all of our team members all the time, that there is a difference between, and that's why we use things like professional speaker. This is how we get paid. And you can imagine how confusing that is for customers, frankly, event planners, event managers, business leaders who aren't shopping for speakers every day. And so they're like, well, how come speaker A spoke for free, but speaker B, you want $10,000? Like, that's so different. And so we fight that battle a lot. So I think it is really important. It doesn't mean you can't be one of those, I speak for free because it brings me in for coaching, or I speak for free because then it sells books or anything else. But I do recommend, if I may, that you decide which one you're going to be on, because it's really hard as a bureau. If I have a speaker who, does 10 free engagements a month, and then I'm trying to get 8,500 here, it can be challenging. So it's perfectly okay. And I just think my recommendation is that you are open, upfront, and honest about it with your clients, whether your clients are the end user or bureau or anybody else. And I think that will help as we're going to talk more about how do you set a fee, and that's part of it too. So what is the ultimate goal?
Anything to add there, Anne, from your perspective?
No, she covered it beautifully. It's sad. It's tough as a speaker when you go full time and you're like, this is how I eat, and there's spin business, and there's the opportunity for video, and there's the opportunity for this and that. But you really do have to draw that scary line in the sand and say, I'm going to say no to this stuff. And it's hard because you're like, well, this could be the big break, Oprah could be there. But in the end of the day, I got to eat, and a handwritten note card doesn't taste very good.
Yeah.
Well, people don't know that. That's the challenge, though. I mean, I can't tell you the number of people who do think that, like, hey, we just want to get you in front of people, and you have to know what's right. From a bureau perspective, though, it can be, you do need to have a fee that you can stand behind. That's going to be my message today. You need to have a fee. Because when people call us, they automatically, so of course we'll say we're in regard to establishing your speaker budget range. Sometimes we can push, sometimes we can get. But if they say my range is 5 to 10 and you've told me your range is 15, but I'll go lower if I have to, we're not going to pitch you at that point because your fee is different. So as we talk through the strategy behind a fee, it's just really important you have a number. People need to be able to come back to you and say, what is your speaker fee, Anne? And you need to have a number. And so you can certainly adjust from there, but you do need to have some place to start. Because I think customers find that very frustrating. If you always come back with, well, what's your budget? Because I'm going to match it. Imagine that being in any other industry. Imagine going to the restaurant and the server saying to you, well, what's your budget for dinner this evening? Then I'll let you see the menu. You've got to have that balance.
But I do hear that from a lot of sources that'll say that is your answer when they say, what is your fee? And I can't imagine how frustrated I would be. Yeah, exactly that. If I went into the hardware store and said, how much is the hammer? And they said, well, how much can you afford? I mean, what? But I mean, it's maybe you guys can touch on this too. Like as you're moving from free to fee or from fee to higher, there's this rub of, and I hear this tension among a lot of speakers. There's this rub of, well, I don't want to leave money on the table. Mm-hmm. So I don't want to say that I'm $2,000 when they maybe had a budget for $5,000. But I also want to get the gig. I want to get the gig for $2,000. So I don't want to say I'm $5,000 and if they only have $2,000. So there's this constant rub that we're feeling of, I want to get the gig, but I also want to maximize value. I don't want to leave money on the table. So talk a little bit about that. And I think, this can apply, I think, to everybody, whether you're free moving to the, $500 or you're 10 moving to 15. What's your advice to us about how do we reconcile that in our brain and approach it?
Lynn, you want to start?
No, you kick. I feel like I've already used up all the number of words I should say for this. So go ahead.
Did Sarah text you? Anyway,
yes.
Okay, so again, all this is from my experience. And I have learned over the past 10 years that you got to figure out your way to do the business. And that's going to be the right way, considering some of the guardrails. There was one year where I was at 5,000 and I would take anything. And I did so many gigs that by the end of the year, I was exhausted and ready to go get a job at Starbucks. I don't want all the gigs. And there comes a certain point where if you're locking up if you're taking everything, first of all, hopefully you'll work a lot. That's a great, and you'll also burn out. But the second thing that happened was I'd start getting calls from clients with big budgets or bureaus who say, oh, we got somebody, they have your full fee, can you take this date? And I'd have it locked up for a $2,000 gig. Mm-hmm. And, I just lost out on my full fee because I was taking everything. And so that, one of the things that I learned was I don't want all the gigs. If you've got now, at this point, if you've got $5,000, there's some amazing $5,000 speakers out there. Let me give you some of their names. Here's what your budget can handle. And then we could also get into talking about up to the value if it's a client that you think the exposure is good for. Mm-hmm. But that's a bit of another conversation.
Mm-hmm. Lynn?
And so again, I'm going to approach this more as a sales strategist. So I'm going to add a third hat. How you discuss budget is really important. So the sales training I do, I talk about teach your clients to be good clients. Okay. That's our job, because the truth of the matter is, even as running a speakers bureau, still 80% of our clients, they're not professional event planners. They're business leaders, they're administrators, they're HR directors. They're people who have, want to do a good thing. and they don't know. So I do a couple of things that I highly recommend. One, if you're going to have a meeting with a client, I recommend scheduling it and even sending them the email that says, hey, when we meet on Tuesday at 9:30, here's a few things we're going to talk about. And I outline like, hey, we're going to talk about, event logistics, date, time, event goals. So I'm going to send them, and then I'm going to put right on there, speaker budget range. So I want them thinking about it versus I catch them off guard on a Zoom call after I got them excited about Steve or Ann or somebody else, and all of a sudden they're like, "Oh yeah, we pay with a handwritten gift or handwritten letter or gift card or whatever." So I let them know in advance we're going to be talking about that. Now, when they come to it, the question I literally ask is, we don't talk about budget. Don't talk about budget first, especially if it's a new client. Then it feels like, you're asking a stranger how much money you got. So we want to bring it up after we start. We talk about goals, we discuss all those things, and then we're going to get into, all right, let's talk about budget's important to everybody. Let's talk about where you are in regarding to establishing the budget range for the speaker for your event. And that's exactly how I say it. Now, if they come back and say 10,000, 15,000, of course we can adjust. But if they come back and say, I don't know, what's your fee? Which is the logical response, friends. And it's the one we don't want, but it is the logical response. I always use the analogy, but my dentist is a longtime friend. I've known her since she and I were kids. And I imagine I had to have a crown fixed not too long ago. And I imagine walking in and being like, hey, Angie, I need you to fix this crown. And she's like, okay, well, what's your budget for this project? And my answer is, I don't know. How much do you charge? And she says, I don't know. What's your budget? And we just go in circles, right? So that's why I recommend if they come back to you and say, we don't know, what's your rate? Again, we can say my speaking, in your case, it'd be my speaking fees because you're talking about yourselves. For me as a bureau, I talk more as all encompassing, but I always say they range from X to Y. Let's talk about you. And because there's all sorts of programs you can do. I mean, if you might start at, again, you might start at Ann's 10,000 or 20,000, or you might start at somebody else's 500, whatever it is. There's a range of things that you can do. And even if your goal is, I'm a consultant who I speak to drive consulting, you can still have a range. You can still have packages. You can still have conversations if that is needed. Obviously, if they say my budget's 20,000 and you're like that you're spending your money in the back, then rock on with your bad self. Build a program that meets that need and hopefully more than that. So those are just a couple little strategies that I use. We need to be comfortable, but we also, as professionals, if we can't articulate what we charge for a speaker fee, we cannot expect our customers. Like, we have to be able to answer those questions.
That's really good. So I'm hearing part of that, Lynn, was you're a proponent of the range. I've heard some speakers are, I have a price. Some speakers are, it's either full fee or free. Some speakers have a range. And so it sounds like you're a proponent of the range and then adjusting to budget and or offering, more or less value based on what the budget is.
So here's what I will tell you. I'm a fan of being upfront and straight with what it is that you offer. So like our speakers, usually most of our speakers I know, listen, this person's fee is 15, but if it's in their home state, if it's, they're available, like they did, like, hey, no harm, no foul, I'll reach out to them. But I have a number of speakers who are like, Lynn, I don't get out of bed for less than $10,000. Like, don't bother me. Don't send me an email. Don't check availability. And I'm fine with either. It just helps me to understand. So I think that's what's really important is that, I also think it's easier for the ones who say, I don't get out of bed for less than X. And I don't know, Steve, if you had planned on talking about this or how you feel about it, Ann, but a lot of our longer term, more experienced, higher level, like an Ann, they also have moved to things they call them day rates. And so they'll say, listen, my day rate is a minimum of X. So and again, I'm just using bananas, 10,000 bananas or $10,000.
It's not an NSA event, so I think we can say whatever we want.
But having a day rate is really valuable because we all know that's the challenge. It's not the 60-minute keynote. It's the, 3 days on the road and the week prepping the customization. So I'm a big fan of that too. Like, hey, you want me to do one keynote and a breakout? Great. You want me to do a Q&A with your sponsors? Great. So I'm a fan of that too.
And how about, comments on that? Go ahead.
Well, just to add to that, I also MC. And so I can throw that in there. Hey, my typical keynote fee is $13,500 plus $1,500 travel. If you want to use me for the full day and have me MC, have me do some, woman on the streets and the trade show floor, you want to have me do a panel, you want to have me do other things or a breakout, we can just work that into a full day rate. And it's just easier for them, and they don't have to it's $1,500 for this and $12 for this. And yeah.
And that's a great, I highly recommend the MC part. I think that's brilliant, and I'm glad you share that. Most speakers are pretty comfortable emceeing, but again, a lot of CEOs aren't necessarily great MCs. Some are fantastic. I've seen amazing leaders, but for a lot of them, or maybe it's a Q&A session, or maybe it's just, I fill in the time in between by, doing trivia or something like that. I do think that's a really nice value add that most speakers can do. Better than people who aren't speakers. Not all speakers. I'm not saying to your level. I'm just saying if that does get a little value add, it's beneficial.
Yeah, I'm not sure if Ann has enough energy.
Different. Oh, sorry, Steve. Go
ahead.
And
I'm not sure if you have enough energy or charisma to be an MC, but I mean, I'll trust you on that. Let me.
It is a different skill set and a completely different set of preparation.
True.
And depending on the meeting planner, it can be quite a thing.
but I will say too, even recovering actuaries like me, I've emceed a number of events, and it looks different, but to maybe to Lynn's point, it takes the onus, takes the pressure off of the president of the association or whoever it is. It's less things for them to have to do. So it is an interesting thing that you can offer if you want to try to increase your fee there a little bit. I saw that in the chat too. Catherine mentioned just a little bit of clarification on what do you mean by day rate? Can we just clarify that a little bit more? She's like adding more appearances during the day, or what do we mean by day rate there?
Yes. So oftentimes day rate, it just means if the speaker's on site that day. So, and a lot of, again, I feel like this is a much higher end. So yesterday we had a meeting with a client and a very high end speaker. And he's like, listen, I'm here for the day. So you let me know. You want me to do, meet and greet. So basically it's like, I'm going to be there for that day. Let's extend the value. If you're thinking, because some people think a 50-minute keynote, does that really, you're really getting paid, $13,500 an hour. And when you can say, hey, here's some additional things we can do. It might be MC, it might not. It might be a book signing. Sometimes a lot of our speakers who are authors, like, hey, I'll stick around on that lunch break and I'll autograph every book. I'll autograph it in advance if you want. I'll sit with your sponsors, or, do an additional session, or meet with your board of directors and do that. Actually is a really good thing for those of you who might be more on the consultative side. Like, hey, I'll do a pre-event workshop with your board of directors to get them in the mindset to be successful at this event, or things like that. It extends the value. You're already there. It gets you in front of more people. And that day rate, I feel like, again, I think that's more, just lends itself to be a little higher value.
Awesome.
I even sat in a dunking booth at a circus themed reception one time. They're like, okay, we're kind of embarrassed to ask you this, but would you do that? I was like, yes, I would.
Well, that was probably on your bucket list to do someday anyway. So.
Yeah, I think that sounds amazing. I love that.
So Ann, are you, so Linda mentioned ranges. Are you a proponent of range? If somebody says, so Ann, what is your fee? Are you answering in a range, or are you answering with a number?
I just go with a number. It's simpler. It feels better for me. It feels clearer. So when I do work with a bureau, I can say, this is my fee. And then we can, if there's a package that we put together where, we add a afterwards Q&A session, a week later, or a coaching session, or, we add some stuff into a package, we can customize. But I just start at one place. I just find it easier.
Okay, so a question for both of, or go ahead.
I just want to clarify, Steve. I think that's the right way to go. I think you do need to have a number that is your get out of bed number. I was thinking more as a bureau. Yeah. It's useful for me when somebody says, listen, my rate is X, but I'm willing to do here. Now, again, obviously most bureaus work off of commission. I want to go here. Yeah. If you tell me you're here, I want here. But if I do know without having to call you and get you off stage and catch you between flights and everything else, that this is my zone. I mean, that's more like behind the scenes, just to clarify.
Yeah. Okay, quick, I know Jen's got to jump off at the bottom of the hour, but she just said she's got a question in the chat. Jen, how about pricing a keynote plus a breakout to make it a win-win if you aren't yet on a day rate? I assume you're kind of just like, well, how much more do you add for an additional session? Yeah, so you got a keynote, and they want you to also do a breakout. Well, what are the factors that we should be thinking about when we're pricing that?
And you want to take that first?
Yeah, I mean, uh, I think what I would do, I think what I did do back in the day was I said, my keynote rate is X. And if you want me for the whole day, or if you want me to do a breakout, same day breakout, I always specify, because a lot of times if it's a 3-day, they're like, great, we'll have you do keynote on Monday and
3 days,
breakout on Wednesday. And it's like, no, so same day keynote, I'll add half the fee again. So if I was at 10, I would say 15 for the whole day. That's a bad example, but
that's exactly the same way we do it. And so I think it's brilliant and perfect. That's exactly, usually we add, it's half. And plus we always call it's half and no speaker and no travel fees, obviously, because they're already built into the keynote.
So let's talk.
And then I always say also, and I'll be there then the whole day. So if you want me to also do a signing, you want me to also do a Q&A, you lead a panel, whatever, we'll just add that in, so I just create that day rate with extra juice in it so they can not be thirsty.
And boy, the event planners love that when you can bring additional value beyond the, show up, do the talk, walk away. I think
rarely do they take me up on it, which is kind of sad.
Really. Well, let's talk a little bit about, I want to shift gears a little. I mean, it's the same kind of topic, but shifting more toward the folks that are just starting out or just starting to get fees, or maybe starting to look at that first maybe fee bump. And I think there's these different voices that we hear all the time. And again, the beauty and the pain of speaking is that you can try to create it however you want. It's beautiful, but it's painful, right? Because just tell me what to do. But there's this, people who speak more. Like we hear that, right? I mean, just speak, just get in front of as many people as you can. Take the free gigs, take the low gigs. Do what you can to get in front of people. It helps you find your voice. It helps you make connections. It helps you show you're busy. And then there's the, don't do those because that's actually devaluing what you bring. So if you can remember Anne and Lynn, kind of back to those early days of, I'm new, I've never been paid, or hey, I'm getting $500, but I'd love to get 5,000. But if I charge 5,000, there's no guarantee I'm going to get that. Right? People are like, well, would you rather do 20 events at 500 or 2 events at 5,000? As if you can just like snap your fingers and choose. I mean, that's not really how it works. So as we're kind of going through this process of setting our fees, how do we think about those competing things of I want stages, I want reps, I want experience, but I also want to get paid?
I remember my first gig. I had left my corporate job in New York City, moved into my parents' basement in northern Michigan, and started sending out inquiries in the state of Michigan. And I got a call back the first week, and I couldn't believe it. I answered the phone. How much we get through the conversation? Yeah, we'd love to have you join us. How much do you charge? And I had not thought about this yet. Because I had no clue. And I was like, $100 will be great. I hadn't even looked it up on the map. He goes, well, tell you what, why don't I give you $200? and it turns out the place was 4 hours away from my house. So it was an 8-hour drive to get $200. But the point here is at that point I learned and I went up. Every single time as things develop, Lori Guest's 3-tier pricing, I think is brilliant. And I use it a lot and I love it. And that's also a great indicator of, they went for the top tier again. It's time to shift that up. But it goes back for me to, I don't want all the gigs. There are a ton of them, and belief in that abundance is important in this business. Otherwise you'll drive yourself crazy, which I understand is difficult for a recovering actuary. I am a leaper. So we've got 2 very different personalities.
Yeah. What are your thoughts about that, Lynn, when early on kind of determining?
Well, I feel like, Anne, you and I had the same experience. Like I did the same thing. I left my corporate gig. People always ask, how'd you become a speaker? Which I such a compliment. Whenever, I swear, 3 or 4 times a week, someone's like, I've always wanted to be a speaker. How do I become a speaker? I'm like, well, you go back to 8th grade and you join the speech team like I did. And then you get a master's degree in communication and you become, but I mean, everybody has a different path. But I was the same way. My dream was to be a keynote speaker. I took a long way around to get here. And the same thing, my very first gig I got, and they're like, great, you're perfect. You were a referral. Somebody saw you back when you were in corporate. What's your fee? And I charged $300. And because I'm like, well, $300 an hour, that seems like a lot. So that seemed like the right thing. So there is no wrong answer, is what I'm saying. Here's the good news, though, today versus 15 years ago. There weren't resources like there are now. The fact of the matter is, between organizations like NSA or Lois Creamer or all these speaker coaches that are out there, all the books you could, there was nothing. When I was a brand new speaker, I went to watch a keynote and I waited around for hours afterwards to meet with the keynote speaker. And I said, because I was a business person, right? Like, I feel like, I said, listen, I will pay you. And I literally said, I'll pay you $1,000 to meet with me and answer all my questions. And I'm not even going to hold you accountable to it. I just want to know, like, just, the mistakes you made and what your price is and how you do it. And she said, no, nope, you're going to someday be my competition. I don't want it. And so I was like devastated. But today there's resources. So that's, I guess, back to your original question. I don't think there's anything wrong with working with a speaker coach or joining NSA and there's more and more and more and more of them every minute. And I think sometimes that it's a better way to be strategic about your pricing because it's not so personal. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Good. Yeah. So I guess another question for how public, what's your perspective on how public we are with our fees? And again, let's keep in mind, most of us are, 5K and under, or just starting out speakers. Again, the feedback I get from different sources, sometimes it's no, never be public, just always get the conversation first. Sometimes people are like, no, put it on your website, be public with it. Like how should we think about that? Or what are the key factors to help us know if being public or not is right for us?
eSpeakers is a great resource where most fees are published. That's like the place I go to kind of compare and contrast and see how it's going. I don't have it on my website. But I want people to know that I've paid my dues. I've been speaking professionally for 10 years. I have eaten ramen for weeks when I didn't have the money. I earned my CSP. I did all the things. And I want you to know that I am a high value speaker. And so when that question comes up, I say my typical keynote fee is $13,500 plus travel. And that I want that line to be drawn in the sand. So while I publish it on eSpeakers and I make sure it's consistent with every single bureau because they sometimes publish it as well. And then, I don't have it on my website, but I don't mind sharing it with pride because I've earned that. And I'm proud of it. And again, I don't want all the gigs because I just bought a really cool house with a great yard and I like hanging out.
Lynn, your perspective?
I agree with you. The good news is the numbers are out there. eSpeakers is a great resource for that. And I think you just have to have the same confidence Anne has in that pricing. So we, as a bureau, we do not list prices on our website. And that was intentional as well. A lot of bureaus do. And that, because again, I think we do things a little bit differently here. And I don't want to spend too much time on the bureau side, just because I know we're focused on speaker fees. But from the bureau perspective, we are different than your typical bureau because we will help. I mean, I just helped a client get a $400,000 training grant. And so that can help. And so we help find sponsors if we need to, or we can help some other things. So I intentionally don't have them on the website because I think people don't always know if someone goes to the website and they aren't experienced booking professional speakers. I think that can scare them into going with their brother Larry's best friend from high school who will, tell the story about something. And so I leave it off. But to Anne's point, I think you do need to be able to say my speaker fee, we use market rate a lot. My market rate speaker fee is $13,500. Let's talk about your budget. And then we can go from there.
So let me, I want to ask one more question. I do want to open it up earlier because I know there's good questions in the chat. And I know this is something where I think people have specific questions. So one more question for me, and then we'll open it up for all the questions. So you can just raise your hand or whatever, signify if you want to be called on, and I can call on you. But this one's more of a psychological question, probably, which is help us as speakers. I'm still struggle with this, and I know a number of the people here because I've had conversations with them struggle with this idea of people, my value as a speaker is higher than what I'm currently charging. And I've been getting advice to raise my fees, but I'm the primary breadwinner and there's no guarantee. I can't afford to have my current fee level dry up in pursuit of that. Yes, I'm worth it. I know my value, but knowing my value doesn't pay my bills. So what sort of advice do you have, either practically or, psychologically, for those of us who are in that camp of, I feel like I should raise my fees, but the risk of raising my fees comes at a real cost to me and my family. How do we broach that?
Lynn, you want me to kick this one off?
Sure. Yep.
It's terrifying. Just like you said, I joke with people that I vacillate daily since 10 years ago when I left my corporate secure job. I vacillate daily between terror and elation. Like, this is the greatest job ever. Oh my God, I'm terrified. Why does this have to be so hard? Every freaking day. I raised my fee to $13,500 in January. Terrified me. I'm still throwing in books for everybody in the audience every once in a while because I'm like, oh my God, thank you for paying me my full fee. Here's a lot of books. Like, this will make me feel better. And it when you add the money, it doesn't add that much to my cost. So I'm like, okay, cool. The confidence a lot of times is just, full clench factor and go for it. It's always going to be a risk. I think you have to just believe that the gigs are out there, the fees are out there. And if you put yourself out, and again, this is my approach, put yourself out there as that speaker, I still get $5,000 offers. And if it's in a month that's kind of quiet for me, I take it. But most of the time it's I believe that they're out there and it hasn't backfired on me yet. So hopefully it'll keep working. That's the best we can do because that's how it is, I think.
Lynn, what do you think?
So here's what I think. I think that the key is deliverables. And I'm sure you've talked about deliverables on here before. But the key is if you're a wherever you are, if you're $1,000 speaker or $5,000 speaker, you're going to 10, or if you're a 10 going to 13.5, or you're a 10 going to 20. The key is you need to think about deliverables. And what I mean by that is not only deliverables in the keynote or the breakout or whatever that is, or workshop, whatever it is you're doing, but what are the long-term deliverables? So what change are you going to make in the audience? And I think too often speakers default to like inspiration. I'm going to inspire people to embrace change for the rest of their lives. And that's great, but it really needs to be very finite. And the higher your speaker fee, the more specific and easy to understand your deliverables need to be. Okay. The other part of that is if I want to be a higher paid speaker, you need to make sure that every ounce of your being reflects being a higher level speaker. And that doesn't matter if you've been here 5 minutes or 50 years. That is, how do you show up? Obviously on all social media, which that's a monster in my mind. Like, I'll never be good at social media, but you got to be on social. You need to be writing. You need to be showing up. Again, you're going to an event, even if you're in the audience, you better show up big. You better have your energy. You need to use language. I think language affects perception. Again, I'm a sales strategist with a master's degree in communication. I care about every single word that you use. So even the word, do you call it a keynote? Do you call it a talk? Do you call it a presentation? You could, and I know a lot of people even here probably use the word talk. I'm not a fan. I think a talk sounds like the person who speaks for free at the local Rotary Club. I think, do you call yourself a professional speaker or are you just a speaker? Those kinds of things. Be super intentional about how you and your marketing, your videos, your one page. you might be shocked at the number of people who apply to be part of Conversionomics that have one-pagers with typos in it, or a picture that doesn't look like them, that kind of a thing. So it's all about, if you really are going to make that jump from 5 to 10. And the other part of that too, Steve, is that in sales, the people who get 10 are the ones who ask for 10. Okay. Like, you have to believe it before anybody else, but then set yourself up for success too. Make sure those deliverables are clear. I mean, and clients want to know what exactly, like, some people are really funny and clever, and they write these funny, topics and descriptions, and a lot of it's about them and what they do off the stage and all that kind of stuff. And I get it. And more power to you. But if you want to get higher fees, the client has to be able to know what exactly is this audience going to get. If I'm going to spend this kind of money, what kind of change, what kind of improvement, what kind of next steps will they take? As we're going forward with everything going on around us right now, that it has had an impact again. And so people are looking for deliverables, ROI. What am I going to get out of this? And I think sometimes speakers spend a lot of time on testimonials, like, oh, Steve was awesome and we laughed so hard and all that. But that's not what people are looking for right now. They're looking for deliverables, change makers. And as specific as you can get, that automatically will lend yourself to a higher fee. But also, I think the more you have those resources, the more confident you'll be in it as well. That being said, it doesn't have to be perfect. I'm a firstborn perfectionist. I think everything needs to be perfect, but sometimes, done is better than perfect. Like, don't wait until, everything. If you wait long enough, you're never going to get out there.
So what I'm hearing from both of you is, if we want to increase our fees, it's, be ready, make sure that our collateral and our clarity matches our, desired fee, be confident in it, go for it, all of those kind of things. And I think we hear that, but there's still, what I'm trying to get at, there's still this reality of, what if it doesn't work? And what I'm hearing a little bit is, well, that's risk, just got to go for it. What if it doesn't work? What's the downside? I mean, is it a problem to just go back to our original fee? Is that a problem? Like, I'm just trying to put people in the perspective of, okay, I like that. I want to get my clarity. I want to get my collateral. I want to go for value. I want to increase my fee from 500 to 2,500. And I want to kind of go for it. And I know I'm not going to get those free or cheap gigs anymore. I'm not going to accept them. So I'm going to go for it. But if it doesn't work, then what? So I'm trying to, help people kind of bridge that gap of, how do I get the courage? Do I just have to have the courage and come what may, and then just be bankrupt if it doesn't work? Or what's, I know, punch it, Margaret. But what I'm saying? I don't think we're all wired, and, I'm probably speaking for myself too. We're not all wired to just be like, well, let's just go for it and see what happens. What's the advice for the folks that are saying, I'm willing to go for it. I'm willing to have courage. I'm willing to try this, but I also have to realize that it may not work. What's the advice for people in that situation?
I mean, you can always change course. And Lynn, I would welcome you to answer on with wishy-washy. My thought is, not to get wishy-washy with your fees. As far as, oh, that didn't work, I'm going to go down 1,000. Okay, next month I'm going to go up 2,000, and next month I'm going to go to, I don't think you want to do that.
Right.
Everything's figure outable, I guess. Marie Forleo said that. There's no destination in this business. You don't get there. I'm not there. There's so much more, and I'm still learning so much, and I'm still shifting and bobbing and weaving and learning. So I think as long as you're paying attention to what's going on, paying attention to what you have in the hopper and what's not working, again, then you can be a little more flexible with your fees when there are budgetary constraints, when you might not normally take a $5,000 or a $500 gig, maybe you take a $500 gig, but you don't change that main level that you're at. But again, I mean, if you want security, go get a job. Like, this is this is a terrifying business with zero guarantees, this many. And there's a lot of people who want to tell their story. And so what I've focused on to make sure that it works is I work really hard on being really good on stage, because the best marketing you can do is with yourself doing the thing that they're paying you to do. And then if you can get spin gigs, if you get bureaus who are like, hey, Ann, we'd love to come have you speak with us. And then you get spin from that. They love that. And then they start booking you more. So it's be good on stage, get good at that. And that's kind of your insurance policy. But as long as you're continuing to pay attention and continuing to learn, you can continue to bob and weave and adjust. But if you want security, you're in the wrong place.
Well, and a couple of things I would add to that, and I couldn't agree with you more. See, my references, I would say, I tell my husband, yep, I should have picked up an application at Taco John's today. That means it's been a rough one. But the other side of it is, if you're going to adjust, first of all, I think we care way more about that than other people do. I think we get really hung up on it and we think, oh, am I going backwards or forwards or something like that? I think it's all in how you sell it. So for example, if a speaker, one of the speakers on our team comes to me and says, hey, Lynn, I'm adjusting my rate. So I just want to give you a heads up, any events booked after July 1st are now either, whether it's up or down. First of all, I always appreciate the heads up. But when it goes up, I'm always going to ask, okay, what's new, better, or different? Like if it's just, I think I'm a big deal now, I'm tripling my speaker fee, that isn't how it works. But if you're adding value or something, you got another certification or another book coming out or something. But also if your fees adjust, I just think it's in how you market it. So if you market and say, listen, I know there's a lot going on right now. We want to make it even easier for our customers to get this fantastic message in front of their teams. So we're, this is the rate right now. I think it's all in how you market it. And I know what you mentioned before about the 3-tier pricing. I know a lot of folks really, really love that. Personally, I'm more of a fan of 2-tier, because we know that once people get 3 options, the human brain doesn't process 3 things as well as it does 2. Same concept, right? Like we've got our essentials and we've got our VIP or whatever you call it. It's up to anybody. But I do find that's a useful tool as a speaker. Now, as a bureau, that gets really complicated. If every single one of our speakers has different for everything. But that's my advice to you as individual speakers. And certainly you could have that with a bureau too. But it's absolutely okay to say, and I found it to be very successful. And I agree with Anne's reference earlier. Oftentimes people go with the higher package. And what I love about that is everybody wins. Also, it does give more confidence. Like, okay, maybe that isn't such a stretch. We start in sales, they always say, don't assume your customer has your pocketbook. So as long as we want to let them do what they want to do. But I do find that's a really gentle way to have like 2 different levels. And that could be where you have your day rate, or I do these other things, or you even have a list of like, here's 5 ways I can support you. You can choose one of them, whatever, depending on what your skill set is, obviously. Or maybe there's 2 things and they can pick one, or you'll do both if they'd like, something like that. So it really is one of those things. I get it. I mean, I really, really do. I had somebody pick my brain the other day, which I hate that saying. Please don't ever use that saying. Or buy me a cup of coffee. I don't drink coffee. Now, martinis, I do a lot for martinis. But she said, at what point do you stop being afraid? That was her question to me. And I think I can't answer that. I mean, I'm Anne and I, again, Anne's mega successful. I have a dream job. There's nothing I would rather do than what I do here at Conversionomics, but it's still scary. But there's other people that will say, I was never scared. I knew I was manifesting my destiny and I knew I was going to have, and wherever you fall in between those extremes, it really does come down to confidence, and it comes down to meeting the needs of the client. I love what Anne said, be absolutely amazing on stage and make it. So here's another sales strategy. Make it easy for people to find you, make it easy for people to book you, and make it easy for people to refer you. Okay. So that you can do. I don't care what you do or where you fit in. You have to make it easy to find you, easy to book you, and easy to refer you. So basically it's control what we can control, right? It is making those emails. It is getting out to people. It is forging partnerships. And I think that controlling what we can control, having a good plan, knowing how long we can do what we can do, because you shouldn't be changing your rates up or down based on fear or how busy or unbusy you are. It should be more about value is my 2 cents, if that isn't too abstract.
Yeah. Good stuff.
And just to be clear, I just put in an awesome podcast that explained the 3-tier pricing in the I didn't put the thing, but Google it. You'll find it in the chat. But
Very
I
good.
rarely do 3-tier pricing with bureaus. I just keep it simple for them. Let them sell me the way they sell me, and they come to me and ask me what I want. If I'm creating my own proposals, that's when I put it in there and I make it interesting. But again, even if they don't take tier number 3, they see what the options are and can make their own little like choose your own adventure kind of thing. So
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think that's a great. I'll wrap up that part of it with like that is a great thing. It's different how we sell ourselves versus how the bureau wants to sell us. I mean, we can have multiple tiers of pricing. We can have 12 different programs. We can have all this stuff, 18 different things we talk about. That's fine, but the bureau wants to know what bucket do you fit in, how much do you charge? Like right? I mean, because they can't, multiply by 95 or by thousands in some bureaus. They just can't process all of that. All right, so
well,
let's get into this. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
just one last thing, and I
Yeah.
know this isn't a bureau conversation, but so many bureaus do business different ways. And so one of the parts of being a high value speaker is keeping track of all that stuff, staying organized, making it easy for them as well as the client. And a lot of that is simplicity and fee.
Yes.
And just making it as easy for them as possible and asking them, how do you want to deal with books? How do you want to deal with options? And they're just, a lot of them are like, no, I sell you as a speaker, shut up and do your job. I'm like, okay, cool, got it.
Well, let's get let's get into the questions. I know we got a bunch of people, so we'll try to get through them all. So we'll do Catherine, Melody, then Elizabeth, Tony, and then Bonnie, for those of you who want to kind of know when your turn is going to be. So Catherine, go ahead.
Awesome. Thank you both so much for sharing your knowledge and experience. It's been really helpful. I had a question. We've sort of been dancing around, or not just around, we've been through it, but we've danced through this topic already, but I just want to clarify it perhaps with a more specific example. So let's say we, in response to Lynn's point, Lynn mentioned earlier, they ask you, or you say, what's your speaker budget? And they say, well, what do you charge? Naturally. And you start that whole roundabout. If you then say, my fees have ranged anywhere from, let's say, 5,000 to 10,000. Let's talk about you. In their mind, they already have a number, whether they've shared with you their budget or not, likely by nature of asking you this question, they haven't shared with you their budget. But in their mind, they're thinking $3,000 or something. And it's, to Steve's point earlier, maybe it is a month that you would do it, let's say a $3,000 talk. You don't have to travel for it, whatever the reason may be. But now there are like it almost feels like the conversation is closed. I find for myself, I say, we can build it however you want to build it. That's why I used to have a speaker fee sheet. I don't anymore for this reason, because it ultimately is entirely variable on what you want to see built for your audience. And so I've actually, as much as I can, unless they continue to push, like, well, what have you charged in the past? As much as I can, I try not to give a number, because it seems like more often than not, that closes the discussion. Because I'm at a point in my speaking career where there's definitely things I won't do, but also I have some wiggle room, particularly if it is a high value opportunity, but that hasn't been part of the discussion yet, all of that. So I'm curious what your perspective would be on something like that, taking that approach of saying, well, it ranges from X to Y, and in their mind, they had, G in their, like, I see Lynn nodding her head.
Yeah, well, I love it because we're talking sales strategy. Are you kidding me? This is better than martinis. So again, it's how you structure it. So language affects perception. We want people to and in the end, people don't really remember the speaker fee. They remember the impact the speaker had on the audience, right? So a couple of things. One, you always want to make the path for the person making the decision crystal clear. So I'm even going to check one thing, Catherine, you said, well, it can be anything from X to Y. Don't say anything. And it's okay to say market fee, our market fee projects start at X, okay? Or if you don't like market fee, in the last year, in the first 6 months, the projects have ranged from X to Y. let's talk about, or how does that match up with what you were thinking? Because unfortunately, even when they say we have no idea, we don't have a budget, everybody does, even if they won't tell you, they have a number in their head. And you might have a whole bunch of professional event managers that understand 5, 10, 20,000. And then you get just the other day, a client I've worked with for 5 years, and we've booked their speakers last 5 years. They have a new event manager, and I know what they paid their keynote for the last 5 years. And she came back with like $250, and their speaker budget for the last 5 years has been $7,500, which isn't great, but it's not terrible. I can usually find somebody close that'll take that. So again, it's how you pitch it. How does that, and I like the language, how does that match up with what you were thinking? And because I want them to say, oh shoot, I only have $3,000. And how you respond to that and say, well, let's talk more about it. Let's see what we can do. That way too, you're not like, okay, and again, as you get higher up, you might get to a point where one of my speakers is like, he literally will say to you, okay, well, you can't afford me. Go call in and find somebody else, right? Like that's just but that's him. That's his style. I don't get that vibe from you, Catherine, that's your style.
No.
But if you can even, I've had people move because the budget is low. We move to online options, or we do a pre-recorded. I mean, there's usually something we can do. And I find that when we work through that budget conversation, we can adjust. Okay. So it's okay to say, even when their face turns red and they look like they're going to pass out because your rate is so high, it's okay to say, how does that match up with what you were thinking? And then they can come back, well, we were thinking 3,000. You said your fee was 5,000. Well, that gives you some room. And
so it doesn't come off to you then as like cheapening your brand by now backpedaling and saying, oh, well, I typically do it for this, but now, let's talk about this.
Yeah, no, I don't want you to backpedal. I think that it's just the idea of let's have an open, honest conversation about budget. And so I don't think you should ever backpedal. Now, I will tell you, even as a speaker myself, I have had times where I'll even just say, let's make sure I understand all the logistics. Let's see what we can do for you. And I always try to find some extended value. And you've mentioned these already, Steve. Like, do they record it? Is there a photographer? Can you have a display with your books? Will they provide the email? Would you be willing to have 5 audience members do online reviews? Or can I record, think about, I think, again, this is a sales strategy, but if you do adjust your fee, I always want to make it feel like they're giving you something extra so that it's not just, okay, I'll just drop my fee for you, because then you do lose value. So sure. That's why I like to be able to come back and say, okay, so let's talk about some ways we can extend the value and make this a mutually beneficial partnership and be able to add some of that, because those things do have value. I think you have to be careful because, again, I'm not a fan. We're all going to die of exposure, Yeah. But there are some additional things. And so I think once they know you're willing to work with them. Now, what's the worst case scenario? The worst case scenario is that, that you're not a fit for them. And that's going to happen. And that comes with confidence. But then I always say, leave them with options, redirect them to a bureau, redirect them to a website, let's stay in touch. We provide a lot of solutions. Do you have a specific speaker sponsor? Have you thought about letting that person do the intro? There's things that we can do. I think too often speakers give up the second the client has a number that doesn't work initially.
Mm-hmm.
Sure,
Catherine, Is that answering your question, Catherine? Or
yeah, it just seems like it's what I'm hearing from you, Lynn, is it's all about if you give that range and they sort of throw their hands up and say, well, we're actually, a couple $1,000s less than that, instead of leaving the conversation flat there, you just say, well, let's see if we can learn more about your event and go from there.
Well, yeah. And the way I word it is, hey, there may be some ways we can get up to that $5,000 value. Or do you have a video? Can you do this? Like, that's the language I use. There may be a way we can get up to that value.
Without it being part of the fee,
essentially. I don't like ranges, though,
right.
On the opposite end of the spectrum. If they say, what's your budget? And they've got 10 in their head, and you say, oh, I'm 5 to 10, they're going to be great. I'm 5. That's my budget. And you just left at $5,000.
For sure. Right.
Which is a bummer about the fee range. Because it's like, oh, cool. We'll take the low end.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
I guess that Anne brings up a good part B of that question because it's almost like who blinks first,
Mhm.
you know? So if that is in fact the case, and you say my typical speaker fee is between 5,000 to 10,000, and in their mind they're like 10,000 or 15,000, to Anne's point, have you just cut yourself off at the knees, So how,
But
from a
here's the
bureau
thing.
perspective, how would you deal with that?
The people who have 10, 15, and $20,000 speaker fees, they know what their budget is. That's what I will tell you. Like
Mm.
when you ask them, because you're going to say, so, let's talk about where you are in regard to a speaker budget range. We want to make sure we're creating a custom presentation that'll meet that. The people who have I know there's $250,000 speaker fees, but in the real world, like 10 to 20 is a pretty nice speaker fee. They'll tell you, like those are higher end, nice events. Those are conferences that have a very clear budget, and they're very likely. When I work with clients who are at that level, they just flat out tell you. They just flat out say, we have 10,000. Just, last year we were at 7,500, we are up to 8,500. Or they usually are far more likely to give you a number. So then you're
Versus
not.
asking the speaker what's their fee.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
And you're
Thank
right. That
you.
is a danger. Frankly, that's a danger. And I'm sure Steve and I know I have. There's times when I'm like, I know I left money on the table. Like I know last year they paid that person that they keep saying bad things about. I know that speaker speaking. I know that was, but also but that'll kill us too, friends. Like we all have our passions, and I still do some because I have a very niche area. And I still do some. I have clients, I've done their sales training for 9 years. I like it. It's easy. I know them. They love me. They buy me Diet Pepsis and McDonald's gift cards. Like I love them. They refer a ton of business to Conversionomics. And it's okay. Like that's how we run our own business. But we can't let that kill us either. Like you accept that, some of us, even I had 16 pro bono requests for emceeing nonprofit events. There's some that speak to my heart, and I do. So that's the good news of the industry, that sometimes you just have to say, you know what, this is the best. I love this topic. I'm passionate about this message, and I feel good about the rate that I got, and I sleep well at night knowing I'm making an impact on people. There's nothing wrong with that either.
And I'm being honest and straightforward, and here's
Right.
my fee. And
Right.
they usually will be like, oh crap, I only have 3,000. And then you can have the conversation. It rarely ends. If you put it in an email, it ends. They don't email you back.
Right.
But if you're having a Zoom conversation or a phone conversation, usually they'll be like, oh crap, I'm 3,000. And then you can be like, all right, well, let's see what we can do. What exactly are you looking for? Blah, 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 whatever. So.
I'm gonna jump in. I'm gonna jump in here. Great conversation. I want to make sure we got a ton of questions coming in, and I know we've got you guys till the bottom of the hour. You're obviously welcome to stay till the top of the hour, but I've asked you guys to commit to the bottom of the hour. So I want to make sure we get to all of the questions that we have too. And I know this is such a topic that we could dig in, 20 minutes on each one. So I'm gonna just kind of keep us moving a little bit. So I'm sorry if that offended
I think
anybody.
that was our check. I think that's the playing the walk-off music, and I think he's playing the
I'm giving you the hook a little bit here. But it's great conversation. But I want to make sure everybody gets a chance to jump in.
You're the host. You can mute us too, Steve.
Oh no, I'm Minnesota nice. I can't. I'm gonna jump in. I'm gonna jump in and interrupt you and apologize for interrupting you. That's the way that I'm gonna run things. It's all my fault, right? That's how it works. So Melody, why don't you jump in here?
Okay, I have two quick questions. My first one is, as a newer speaker, how do I discern what that starting point makes sense to be? Like I've just finally actually started saying the number that I think is like realistic and stopping, which my daughter keeps telling me, Mom, say a number and stop talking. So I'm trying to listen to my daughter. So there's that, like, what makes sense? And I get the point of not doing the range. So is there like a magic number you can say, like, so I speak on caregiving, caregiver resilience. I've been a caregiver for 30 years. I have a new book. So like, that's a little background, but I'm just like,
what's your number, Melody?
What I said the other day was my fee would be between, and then I know not to say between, I said between 1,500 and 4,000.
Okay.
Is that, I don't know. It's like, and I've gotten all those very good reviews when I speak and that kind of thing. So I just like, I'm trying to look at it as, but it's hard to know, right? It's hard to know what is that point.
Well, and for me, I think that's where I started that range. I started at 2,500.
Okay.
And, I was super uncomfortable with it, but not so uncomfortable that I didn't think I was worth it. So I think there's a level of what are new speakers speaking at. And then there's also a level of what am I just a little uncomfortable with, but not like I'm peeing my pants every time I have to say it out loud.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
And I'm going to go out on a limb. I don't think anybody's speaker fee should be less than 2,500 in this day and age.
Okay.
I'm just going to tell you,
That
I think
helps me.
anything less than 2,500 is suspect. I think that, and I mean that from the client's perspective.
Right. Like you're not any good if you're
Right, but you're a beginner, or you're gonna just, you want to sell something, or that kind of thing. So
okay.
it doesn't mean you can't take less than that, but I just think anything below 2,500 is suspect, and it just
Super
doesn't
helpful.
look professional. That's
Super
just my
helpful.
2 cents.
And then my other quick question is, so I own a home healthcare company, which is my day job, and then I did the speaking business as well. So that's my other piece. So sometimes in that realm, I do speak for free because I'm speaking for referral sources, or I'm speaking for a community event, or I'm partnering with hospice and we're doing an event, those kinds of things. How do I make sure that when I'm speaking that way, that then when I later on am putting on my speaker hat and saying, okay, and I have different business cards, I have different, and I'm not necessarily prospecting to the people in my own community as much. But how do I make that delineation? How do I make people understand that easily without confusing folks?
Lynn, you want to kick that one off?
So I guess 2 things. One, I think, again, being very careful about how you structure it. Do you call it pro bono? Do you call it somebody on our team? Steve, is it you? Isn't it you? Don't you call it like community impact or something?
The way that I do it is I have what I call the community impact program, which allows me to do those low fee things and justify it versus just saying, I'm hungry, I want to take any gig. I call it something and just talk about doing it on a limited basis.
And I think that's cool. I have to say, and now again, as a bureau, I don't really use that because it's
Right.
0 paying job for Steve doesn't do us any good. And I just have this, every professional speaker should get paid, like in the heart, in my heart. But I think that, here's 2 more things I want to share about that. Also, I have gotten in the habit, this is more my personal speaking, because like I said, I never ever have our speakers do pro bono work.
Sure.
I know there's value in it. I'm not saying you shouldn't. I'm just saying it goes against profession. To me asking a speaker to speak for free goes against them being a professional speaker. I think it's gross. I didn't like when people ask me to do it, so I don't do it. That's me. But as my personal speaking business, I do have a contract for those, and I have language in there that explains, and I think your community impact, I love that, like that language, whether or not you steal that from Steve or you come up with something that's on your own. I haven't stolen that, Steve, just so you know, I didn't, but I love it.
You can.
But I think that also helping people understand, like this is a passion, or this is why you're doing it, just so it feels more, because the challenge is people who, when you speak for free, they want to refer more free jobs to you.
Correct.
And so I think to be careful about that. And so we have a really simple agreement that just kind of outlines, like, this is what we're doing. I also think it's good to have a number of how many you do in a year. Like we can do 3 a year, because the fact is you can be a super high and you're going to get asked all the time. And I want, sometimes it's just hard to say no. This year, like I said, I had 16 pro bono requests, and I finally just had to say, hey, we've reached our maximum for this year, please reach out, something like that. So that just a couple, I think you still treat them as professional speaking engagements. When we throw them away as free, I think that can have a negative impact. So, and it's okay to have those standards for yourself too.
Okay.
Melody, is that helpful?
Yes. And did you have something you were going to?
Yeah, go
one
ahead,
of the things that I'll do, and I just did this recently, I emceed a top workplaces award ceremony. A women's shelter came to me and said, hey, we don't have a huge budget, but we can pay you $2,500 to MC our fundraiser. And I was like, I'm not taking these people's money. What I did was they paid me, and then I donated it back at the event. So that's a really nice way to let everybody know how great you are, and that you're a professional, and still not take their money. Anytime I give any kind of discount, I put it on the invoice too. I put my full fee and then minus X% for a community impact discount, or sleep in my own bed discount if it's right down in Tampa. I've got a few different, and I always make it silly, but it shows you're getting a 13.5 speaker for whatever you're getting. So
we do that too. We always put market rate and then, VIP incentive or referral fee or extra special bonus because we love Alicia, that kind of stuff. So we have some fun with that too. I think and again, the more you get that out there, the more comfortable you are. It doesn't mean that your market rate isn't going to change in July. It just means people do like to see that value.
Right. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks for the questions, Melody. Elizabeth, you had one in the chat. Do you want to go ahead and share that? Yeah, go ahead. You can unmute.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, you're
suddenly
good.
lost my Zoom skills. I think it was like an aside. Lynn said something to the effect of course, we bundle all travel expenses in the fee anyway. And I just wanted to come back. Did I hear that right? And is that what you normally do? No, I heard it wrong.
No, I'm sorry. I talk fast and try to be funny, and I probably just bumbled something. But no, we always call out travel fees separately. So, and again, whether that about 40% of our speakers have a travel allowance that they're like, listen, it's just a flat $1,500. I pick all my own stuff. I don't want to get approval for anything. Or we call it out that the client covers hotel, ground. Travel fees are a funny thing. Some people do per diems and some people do, all this stuff. That does make it harder to sell. I've got on our team, one person doesn't drive. And so I've got one person who has to have, they don't like rental cars because they're 6'7", and so they always want this, or, one of our speakers always turns in a receipt for 2 coffees at the airport. I still don't know what's happening there. But I will tell you, as a bureau, I much prefer people who just have an allowance and just say, you know what, it's X. If there's something extraordinary going on, so that, like if I can't fly for that, or, there's some air traffic controller shortage, we'll deal with it. But I am a fan of allowances for travel. Unless it's some clients and government agencies, often you can't do travel allowances. They have to see receipts. So no, I have one speaker. I don't think this is what I was referring to. I do have one speaker who just says, my rate is $10,000. I don't talk about travel. I'll just figure it out on my own. So each speaker does it differently. I will say I prefer a travel allowance as long as it's realistic. I had one person who's like, my travel allowance is $3,500. Well, I mean,
going to Asia,
you're going to have to explain yourself.
Okay. Does that answer, Elizabeth?
That's great. Thank you.
Okay.
so
So
just a quick one, Steve, on that. I had one gig where they wanted itemized receipts afterwards, and it was a gig where I was going from one to the other. So instead of a flight, they didn't pay for the flight. They paid for a one-way rental car. But they came back to me all mad. They were like, what? Why is this rental car so expensive? What are you getting, a Maserati? And I'm like, well, but and the challenge here is I just kicked butt on their stage and everybody was super happy. And now they're mad at me.
Yeah.
After the event, which I don't want. I don't want them feeling so, like, I charge flat fee, and like if I go over, great. There have been times where my flight's delayed, flights canceled. I couldn't get a rental car, had to rent a limo to go 2 hours to the airport I could get to. I don't talk to them about that. I cover it because on the last booking, the $1,500 was $500 more. Great. It all evens out in the end. Right. If I had an accountant that paid attention to that stuff, they'd hate me.
Yeah,
I think for me.
In general, most speakers, you almost always make a little more money with doing the flat travel anyway. But then you can be as cheap or as luxurious as you want to without having to justify it to anybody. Okay, so questions. I got Tony, Bonnie, Sherry, Denny, and Catherine. So Tony.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. My question is, if you're reaching out to somebody about a possible speaking gig and you're essentially cold calling, would you include your fee in that initial inquiry, or would you make the inquiry, gauge interest, and then in the course of the discussion, then broach that? Because I see pros and cons for both, but I'm wondering if there's one route you'd recommend over the other.
I'd go back to what Lynn said earlier and pound away at the value that their audience will get and try to get them on the phone.
Deliverables. Yeah. The only exception, and I agree with you, we never include that on any emails or anything like that. The only exception is that there are some organizations, usually professional organizations, there's one I've run across, I'm sure there's more, where it's called Voice of the Industry. And if you're a voice of the industry in this industry, they get paid $750, no matter who you are. And so in that industry, we do have to clarify because they think all speakers magically work for $750. And so that is a really unusual, obscure example. But no, cold emails, cold calls, never talk about pricing until you understand what the value is. That's how you make sure you match up the deliverables.
Thank you.
All right, Bonnie. Thanks, Tony.
Yeah, my question was on a book. Don't have one, but working on one. Just curious what you've noticed in the industry about ability to change fees or acceptance on higher fees based on if you have the book or not. And then within that, is there a difference between the self-published versus the traditionally published book?
I think just having a book, people are like, ooh. I mean, and so few are ever opened. Like literally the percentage of books that people buy that never leave their shelves is painful. That's why I wrote a tip book, because it's like, put it on the back of your toilet. You got 5 minutes, read 3 tips, marinate on them, and then get on with your day. Like that. Like, I'd like you to read this. But anyway, so people go, ooh, and so it adds to your credibility. I love it as an add-on for the audience. So if people want to buy 300 of them and everybody gets one, awesome. That's a business card that they're not going to throw away. So I love it for that. I self-published. I know there's value to doing traditional publishing or a hybrid publishing model. That's a whole nother kit and caboodle conversation with all kinds of aspects. I went through Ingram Spark. I had a graphic designer who knew how to set up the PDF. It was the friggin' easiest thing I've ever done.
But you never sensed that somebody cares that it was self-published.
Nobody's ever asked.
Right,
I mean,
right.
There's a level of credibility when somebody else publishes it, but you can also create your own publishing house and put that on the label and make it look like somebody published it for you. I mean, there's so many workarounds these days that just do the thing and get it out there. But to answer your question, I use it. It's a great add-on to that 3-tiered pricing. If you get that 3rd tier, you get a book for everybody in the audience, So
and that sometimes too that comes out of the swag budget, so that's a good way. Like usually it goes the other way. Usually the other way is, hey, what's your swag budget? Well, you can buy 300 copies of Anne's book. So then Anne might say, listen, I might take a little bit off of my keynote speaking fee because their budget is lower because now I got coming out of the swag bucket and everybody wins. Mm-hmm. So I will tell you, as a bureau, people love books. Like you said, like I have a whole, if you can see the top of there's all my speakers' books up there. People love books. And so that's me as a bureau, wearing my bureau hat. As a speaker hat, my very first blog when I started as a speaker was why I didn't write a book first. So, and I think that may have been a really bad idea back in the day, but I don't think anybody, I think 1% of the population is going to look in the back and try to figure out if you self-published it. I get asked all the time if they have books or podcasts. Podcasts are huge. People love speakers with podcasts. If you're not have your own podcast, get on podcasts. But yeah, I think having a book is great.
So Lynn, have you noticed then, is there more interest among clients in generalities for speakers that have books? And do you think that having a book actually translates into being able to garner a higher speaker fee?
I think if it's a good book, if it's, again, even books are different. If the book is your life story, it has value. If your book shows people how to handle change and is it coming at you faster, I think that has a different value. And so I think it depends on the value. I do. I think that people assume that an author, as long as they're a really amazing speaker. I've also seen people who are really stronger authors who want to sell their book from the stage and they're terrible speakers, not on our team. But, I've seen some authors that aren't very good speakers. And so it's not going to overcome that. Your presence and your deliverables are your signature card. But I do think having a book, whether it's self-published or not, I've even seen some books that are ebooks and they like ebooks, or they like, it's a white paper that's basically 10 pages of something. I do think people like tangible stuff. So yes, I do think that helps support a higher speaker fee.
Bonnie, does that get to the heart of your question, or do you want clarity?
Nope, that was perfect. Thank you. And thanks for your follow-up, Steve, also.
All right. Sherry.
I do coaching and consulting, so I don't see myself being a professional speaker only at any point. And so ultimately, I'm trying to get coaching and consulting clients. So I speak to a lot of a lot of different forums free of charge. And I've also been paid for my speaking. So I have a general challenge when I reach out to someone or someone reaches out to me, what to say as a price, because it really does differ based upon, okay, is it the business analysis association, or is it Rotary, or is it a corporation reaching out for me to do a presentation of some sort? And I do workshops too. So I feel like I get kind of scattered, and I'm not really sure what sort of guidelines there should be around that, because I do various things and not speaking only. Did any of that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. So here's the analogy I would say. If five of us were going to order a pizza from Domino's, okay?
Sweet.
Yeah, right. I love food. So they're not going to, but Domino's isn't going to charge us different if it's delivered to my business or Steve's home or Anne's rave, right? So I think, although Steve seems wild to me, maybe I should have made him the rave, but I do think that does create challenges. But again, you run your own business, you can do it the way you want. The key is, how do you make it easy for people to book you? If your ultimate goal is for them to book you, whether that's as a speaker to drive consulting or something else, you do need to figure out how to simplify that message for the client, because customers don't like to hear, it depends if your audience is good for me or not, which I know you would never say.
And I haven't said that, by the way.
Of course not. But that is the challenge. So, I mean, I guess the more you can put parameters around it, whether some people will say, I have a fee for professional business organizations. Okay. So if I'm going to speak to Rotary or the healthcare Minnesota group or whatever, you might have some programs in there. But my recommendation as a business strategist is that you should have some parameters around what is the difference between the pro bono and the 2,500 or whatever else it might be. If you actually want to do more of it, you've got to make it easy to sell.
Okay, I like that a lot. And actually sharing that, does that make sense? So if I'm speaking with an association saying, hey, this is my price when I work with associations, or this is the investment when I work with associations, or something like that, or just leaving that off, and just because I have been concerned in the past when I've done something free of charge and then somebody else pays me, and clearly they're different environments, but nobody's talking about me. I know that logically, but I feel like, oh gosh, what if they find out that this other place paid me $1,500 and then I did this free of charge, no problem.
That's the fee integrity conversation, right?
Yeah.
Like that's always, that's a common. And I'm gonna let you speak to that. I feel like I kind of talked about it a little bit, but.
Yeah, I mean, the way I would do it is I would do the research beforehand and have this is my consultant, package in my head. This is my speaker package. I do the research beforehand and I decide, is this consultant, is this speaker? I offer them that. The bureaus aren't going to want to even talk to you about the consultant piece. So that's because it's free. So they're like, that doesn't help us any, have fun. So leave them out of that. But yeah, you make the rules. So make the rules. And then I would decide on, is this client a potential thing? And I'm going to offer it for free. And then I would also call it something different on my invoice.
Yes.
Yeah. And I would also make it super clear to that person, I'm going to be selling my consulting, my coaching. I'm going to be offering a package. So they know, because selling from the stage is yucky if they don't know it's coming. And they will talk about that.
Yeah.
They will talk about that.
Okay.
Yeah,
I hadn't considered just calling them different things. I really like that idea. Okay. Thank you.
They absolutely should. And again, to your point, having it documented, and it might be professional associations with more than 30 people in the audience, and whatever, whatever that is. I do think whether you share that with your clients or not, I think just you wrapping your head around it will help you articulate the difference.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
And I think that whole fee integrity question too, just in general, so many people have that. I have the same thing, Sherry, that Midwestern guilt of, well, they're only getting less because they asked. I mean, that doesn't seem fair. But I think having those parameters, having that justification, even if it's just for our own selves, is super helpful. It doesn't have to be published, doesn't have to be whatever, but just to feel like, okay, I can justify this somehow helps those of us who get hung up on that for sure.
And I'm Iowa nice, by the way. So yeah.
You're Iowa nice. I said Midwestern, because
Yeah, that's true.
Iowa, right. All right. So, and I know just you guys refresh. So Ann and Lynn, you guys committed to the bottom of the hour. So if you need to jump off, absolutely fine. We'll continue questions. We're going to stick on here till top of
I
the
don't
hour.
know the difference between the bottom of the hour and the oh, you're half.
Oh,
okay.
well,
Never mind.
I want to say 3:30, but then everybody's like, "Isn't that what? 3:30. What time is it?"
I
All
put
different time
5. I
zones.
don't know. I'm good.
So, but we have two more questions, two more folks that had questions, so we want to make sure we get to those. Denny, I saw you kind of physically raised your hand there, so I want you unmute if you still have a question, sir.
Okay, well, this isn't, a year from now, I am going to be a marketing genius. I've always said I'm not the worst businessman in the world, but I'm in the bottom 10. And progress, I'm now in the bottom 25. But I'm trying to take little bits and pieces here. As far as the initial fee, what I'm trying to use, or what I do use, my fee for a keynote is boom. Not, if somebody said, well, you can buy this car for 20,000 or you can buy it for 25,000,
Right.
I'd probably take the 20,000.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I charge from 5 to 10,000, that's so and then from there, that starts a conversation. And then you say, tell me what you're looking for. That opens up the conversation to find out, and one thing, if we know something about other fees, I used to do this back before I went back to teaching, is say, well, who have you had in the past?
Sure.
That
Absolutely.
gives me an idea then of what they're used to paying.
Absolutely.
If they had somebody who's up here, I'll know they're used to paying that amount. And
Absolutely.
one thing I wouldn't do, if I say my fee is blank, and they say, well, and I know they could pay more, I wouldn't go above what I say is my top keynote fee. That might rise, but to me, I would have a hard time saying, well, I usually charge 5,000, but I'll charge you 10,000. But that's just my personal philosophy.
Right. And that's confidence. That's confidence in your fee, just like we talked about. And if you have one keynote, that's the other thing I made a note of. And when I talk about ranges, that's usually for people, like I said, that can do more. If you have one keynote, if you have one 60-minute, beautifully packaged, that's the jam. Absolutely. I agree with you completely. That's what you say, when if they ask you what your keynote is. And I'm the same way. I wouldn't raise it just to match it, but I might extend the offering. If I know that the speaker is a $10,000 speaker, their budget's 15, I might say, oh my gosh, this is fantastic. Because in addition to the keynote, we can do this, this, or this. So yeah, your fee, really, it shouldn't be that flexible. I agree with you. You wouldn't go in and get a range. However, if I order a brand new car, they're going to say it starts here. And now let's talk about the wheels and the rims and the engine and those things. So the more concrete you can be.
Good idea. Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. That's great feedback. Okay.
Is that Catherine? Do you want to go ahead?
Yes, thank you. Hello again, everyone. I'm back. So, Lynn and Ann, we sort of, we didn't talk about ERGs earlier, but we did talk about associations or community impact programs, as Steve mentioned earlier, where it's perhaps a modified fee or a lower fee than you typically would accept. What I've found about employee resource groups is if they're funded at all, it might be $300 to $500. And typically what is accompanied with that fee as part of the conversation is they always say, and you'll get exposure. We love exposure. Love it so much. You'll get exposure to, people who attend from our executive sponsor or something like that. It's all of these things that make it sound like the incredible value is almost there, like it's almost within reach, And I don't know how it's been for others, but I've enjoyed my ERG sessions, and I get a lot out of them personally from just, it's interesting to see feedback from different companies and different audiences. It's never a waste of time. I would never call it that, but it's like the overpromise of exposure for maybe then you'll be our keynote for our corporate executive summit. Like or you could then come on and speak for a bigger group within our organization. It seems like it's always like a very big, you know, what if, which never ends up happening. So I'm wondering how you would suggest dealing with ERGs. I don't want to write them off clearly. I think that they're great. I want to support them. A $300 or $500 event would be significantly under what I would consider to be my community impact program. But I just would love to hear how you might handle working with an ARG because they do have a fixed budget. It's not like if they have a budget at all.
No, they don't. And I think we all need to be super careful of knowing what they have because I've spoken for a lot of women's ERGs at well over $5,000. So I think a lot of times we limit ourselves by saying they don't have, period. And sometimes you're going to come across them, and many of them will only have $500. But I think that we all need to be careful of that because we talk ourselves out of work. But there was another thing I was going to say, and I can't remember what it was. Go ahead, Lynn.
No, I guess I was just going to build on that. Don't assume that a nonprofit or that they don't have a budget. I think that, it's funny. We get that a lot. Well, we're a nonprofit. So what do you have? And I love that Steve's whole community impact, you can decide. But it's so funny. One of our speakers said this to me. We were both working at an event. We were just chit-chatting about the, challenges. And she goes, Lynn, the NFL is a nonprofit.
Yeah.
And it makes $360 billion a year or something. So I think the fact of the matter is, you do have to be careful about that. And it is something that at the end of the day, you decide, how that fits in your business, but don't assume. And then even too, if they tell you it's 500, I still follow up. Okay, so tell me about that number. And I love Denny's point. I love asking tell me about past events. What speakers have you had? Who was really successful? Maybe there was, you don't have to share the name, but if there was a topic, I only want to hear about good speakers. I don't want to hear about bad speakers. But was there a topic that fell flat? Help me understand that. That helps guide you. So I do think sometimes ERGs or just nonprofits in general will start with here. But then when they say, hey, we had Ann Boney or we had, Meredith Elliott Powell and you're like, okay, so that gives us a little better understanding. But yeah, the first step is
going back to that value too. Is this what you want them to walk away with? And the other thing is I wanted to say, I did remember it. I've spoken for a lot of companies that are like, oh, and we can get you in with so-and-so. Now what I'll do is say, great, get me that conversation. And once we're in a serious conversation about consideration, and I think I've got that, I would be happy to do your thing for $500. But I have never, literally 0 times, gotten something when they're like, oh yeah, we'll get you in with me, and it's like, yeah, that never happens because they get done with me and then they're like, man, we're good. And that's, maybe if I was better, they would have taken me in, but
I've actually
rarely do they have any pull with the guy upstairs that does the main event. Unfortunately,
there are conferences and there are conference networks that actually use that as their model. And I've discovered that by speaking to a lot of speakers where they will say, do this one for free or do this one for reduced, and then we will see what that does. And that's actually their model. That's their strategy. And then every speaker they approach, they make that same promise to, and they've never had that offered, never come to fruition. It's the empty carrot, as Elizabeth put in the chat. Does that help, Catherine? Is that?
Yeah, I think it's
back
the
to
age-old
Lynn's
question.
Point, it all goes back to how you want to run your business. And because I do some things because they feel good. I really like the organizer and I really like the group. I'll do it for $500. It's virtual. I'm going to be at home anyway. I can do it without pants on. I'm good.
Yeah.
TMI, and too many TMI. But yeah, and I think from the nonprofit.
That's why I'm doing this, Steve. I mean, come on,
Well, you're getting paid way more than $5,000 for this thing, but we're still trying to figure out the business economics of that one. Sorry, Lynn, you're not getting paid, but Ann's getting $5,000. It's fee integrity. But just in the nonprofit thing too, I clarify mine are charitable nonprofits because I kind of had that same sort of thing. Wait, this is a nonprofit, but yeah. Charitable nonprofits for me, at least in that thing. Okay, so this is just kind of, we can keep going with the conversation, keep going with the questions about fees, open conversation, or we can just kind of go wherever. I've specifically designed the last half hour of this to be, all right, what else is on people's minds? So feel free to bring up any topic, any question around fees, or wherever we want to go. And Lynn, obviously love to have you stick on, but you certainly don't need to do that. So I'll leave that up to you. But what else is on people's mind, or continue the fee conversation? Fourth tier, no pants. Yes. That's the.
Melody's got her hand up.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see that. Thank you, Melody.
That's okay. Thank
We
you.
need a real facilitator here.
Right. My question is, so I just pitched two speeches in the last 2 weeks, and I don't know that I felt that comfortable trying to discern what questions I should be asking them. So are there tips or ideas of what specifically should I be finding out from them so I can even kind of further the process and know which way to direct the conversation so I can better pitch for those opportunities?
Are you referring to like before you make the first pitch, or once you're like on a sales pitch call?
On a sales pitch, they want to talk to me about their event. They've sent me information about their event, and now we're talking about it. Yeah, so in that space.
Go ahead, Ann, sorry.
Oh, well, I mean, if it's in the case like with the way Sherry was talking about, where she's either going to do it for free so she can sell her consulting services, or she's going to sell her speaking services, I would decide that before the conversation. I don't decide that on the call with them.
Right.
I do my research separately on their website, on ChatGPT, and all the places to find out all the information I can about that business and make that decision then. But to your point, I will figure out based on the conversation what they need, whether it's, a lot of times for me, the level of interaction comes into play. I mean, I can do a highly interactive workshop with 500 people. It's a fun, all over the place thing, and it works. Or I can stand up on stage and do a keynote with a little interaction. It isn't that fun. And a lot of times in that conversation, that's where that stuff comes out, and they're like, oh, we want them to talk to each other. We want them to make sure, they have interaction. And I'm like, okay, cool. I think you want more of a workshop-y. So I think it just is based on what your offering is. What those questions are going to be.
Yeah, and one of what they were asking me about was a keynote, but then they also had a workshop. And as we were talking, they're like, oh, it sounds like you have a lot of information in this area, or you might be able to take that and facilitate it into a workshop. And I'm like, absolutely, if that's something you'd like to do as well. But I just I want to feel more comfortable. And I guess maybe it's just repetition. I don't know.
And that's exactly the reason that when you get on those calls, you ask them questions about their event, their needs, their audience, all that stuff first, so you can figure out what it is you're going to offer them. I want to make a relevant proposal. So finding out, learning about them first is key. Because if I just start giving them something, they're going to be like, well, that's not what we need.
Gotcha.
And I think, but those questions should be very structured and written down. I highly recommend that you have, whether it's something you have on your computer or it's something you're taking notes on, but I do recommend that you have a very set intake form. We call it an intake form. You can call it whatever you like. Yeah. But that does cover, because sometimes something goes off and we get off on this thing and we realize we hadn't talked about budget, or we hadn't talked about, is there a display area? My favorite first question is just, let's talk about the goals of your event. Like, before we get into how many people and what is this and are you selling and all that stuff, like, what are the goals? Like, do we want information, motivation, inspiration, that kind of a thing. And then because they want to share that, that's the other thing. I see this mistake made sometimes, that we start talking about us and ourselves and our message, and they really want to tell you, they want you to tell them if you're a good fit or not. They want you to be able to say, okay, this looks like a great match. So letting them talk, letting them share, letting them explain the history of the event, like I said, the past speakers, all those kinds of things, and have that written down, have it a format that you go through every time is really valuable. Otherwise, we're so busy focusing on what we're going to do and say that we sometimes miss some of those.
Right. And this was nice because they had already sent me an email with exactly the structure of their event, what they wanted for each thing. So it was nice because I had already sort of come up with this is how I would address this point, and does this make sense in what your framework of what you're looking for if we went in this direction? So it did was super nice to have that. But for those events that don't have that, this is helpful to have it just like, okay, here's my intake form. These are the questions I want to
I think it's so freeing to have those questions
elicit.
written down, and you can either ask them all or kind of pick and choose based
Right.
on where they are. And I think, just doing even just a dabble of research, I think
Yeah.
shows so much credibility. Like I was speaking to the soybean industry, and I didn't know a lot about soybeans, but I, researched a little bit, use a little chat GPT, and then just to be able to say, I know there's so much, global demand coming from Brazil. Is that an issue that you guys are facing? Or, that kind of thing, just like boom, they're like, oh my gosh, this person's legit. So I think having those questions, I think for me, a couple of questions, just real tactically that have really worked well. What are the biggest problems that you're facing?
Okay.
After my talk, what do you want people to either think or believe or do? And then even a
So
question around, like what other speakers have you had in the past that people really loved? And why do
Yeah.
you think that was? Just those things, I think obviously gives you great insight, but again, it's letting them talk. Like that's what they want to be able to do, and it's
that is
showing
really
how professional you are. I mean, even asking a question logistically about how will the room be arranged, like just shows that you're professional, even if you don't even care. Just asking, I mean, you might, but you could, but sometimes just asking those right questions make them go, okay, this is somebody who's prepared, they're professional, they're not going to miss any details. And I think that sells you almost more than what your marketing collateral does.
I
So,
Perfect.
agree with
Those are
you
great questions.
100%. And I would research the person too, connect
Yeah.
with them on LinkedIn.
Yes.
I can't tell you how many people when you can say, gosh, you've been a part of Master Brand for 21 years. Tell me about, like that just makes you, conversely, I've seen speakers show up for interviews where they're just like, who are you again?
right.
When is your event? And I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. And you see the bureau rep just like, oh no.
I know. I'm like, I just sent you another email. So, but yeah, it's really about them. They really want to talk. That's what they want. And as
Yeah.
speakers, we think we should be doing all the talking, but they want to talk.
Perfect. Thank you
No,
so
no,
much.
no,
Good-
good.
good
And
insight.
just so you
So
guys know,
much.
so Lynn and Ann did put some contact information in the chat, so make sure you check that out. I will add that to the master document as well, but if you want to make some connections there. Sherry Z, Iowa, represent.
So, and you said something that made me realize I had potentially been limiting myself in a way that I hadn't realized maybe I shouldn't be. When you said, hey, I can do a workshop B type thing and make it fun for 500 people, I thought, wait a minute, because I kind of had in my mind, I'm really good at workshops. I love it. I love to have interaction more than just standing up there talking at people. At least that's how it is for me. That's how I kind of feel when I'm doing it, and not interacting. And so do you charge the same thing when you make it a workshop?
Yep. My workshops, my keynotes are same fee. It's not, nope. You get me, you're getting the same knowledge. You're getting the same, you're getting 51 years of life. You're not getting 1 hour of my time.
Okay. So I think I've kind of stayed away from even saying anything about workshops because in my mind, this may have just been in my mind, I was thinking, oh, that kind of minimizes what I do.
Yeah, and what I've found is that, like Lynn said, she doesn't like the word talk. Some people say keynote, but they want a workshop. Some people think a workshop and a keynote are the same thing. Like everybody has a different definition of what all these things are. So, if I know a client's calling it a keynote, but I'm going to make it workshopy. I'll still call it a keynote for them because that's what they think it is. And good to go. You're getting a keynoter. Woo! But I mean, it doesn't matter if they end up getting what they want. They're happy. And, so
Right.
that's, yeah. And that's, and that because people want, so meeting planners say they want interaction, they want their people to be engaged. So even if you talk the whole time, as long as they're engaged, you got to be real good to be able to engage people for an hour without ever talking to them. But keeping those, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Good stuff. Any other questions, comments?
It's fun to uncover all those ways we limit ourselves, isn't it? You're like, oh, look what I just did.
It's so true. And sometimes it's just that certain word, that certain way one of you put it, that kind of unlocks that whole deal. And then we realize how, like you guys have already both mentioned, and everybody kind of here said, how much autonomy we have in building the business we want. Because I think so many of us, myself and maybe Sherry, you a little bit too, and maybe others are just like, well, is this the right way to do it? Like, I mean, is this what I'm supposed to do? Especially when we're new to the thing. And I think we're all looking for that magic formula and to realize, oh, there really isn't the magic formula, but there's many magic formulas. And so
Right.
I think that permission to build the business that we really want to build is scary, but also exciting. But I think we need to constantly be reminded of that.
It's true.
Especially funny because I coach people on limiting beliefs.
Right.
So, and thank you for helping me recognize mine.
It's a case of here, take my advice. I'm not using it.
But Sherry, I love that, Anne. I'm totally going to steal that from you. But there is an interesting philosophy on the pricing of keynotes versus workshops. I think there are people who think keynote is more, but actually I think the research is that workshops are like, people are like, well, it's just a workshop for 8 people. Well, the prep is the same. I don't know about all of you, but prepping for 8 people is the same for 800. I mean, it's the research and the customization and the, all of that. It really doesn't, it's not by person necessarily. Now, if you have a book or a guide or something that goes with it, it might vary by numbers. But that to me is an interesting conversation, the value between keynotes and workshops, and how is it different and is it valuable? But to that point, Sherry, and everybody else, I had made a note earlier, make sure everybody knows everything you can do. Don't assume. I mean, there's speakers out there that have 25 topics, which I know there's a lot, like, should you have 25? Probably not. But you would be shocked at how many people think that every speaker has one topic, like can only speak on X. And so I think, letting people know, even if they're hiring you for a keynote, that you're available for workshops or you're available, like, make it clear, make sure people know the value and the solutions you bring. I think too often we're like, I don't want to be too salesy, but gosh, they're already going to know and love you. Make that available. To that point, the other thing that, again, is, I didn't invent this, but I think it's brilliant. And I didn't do it myself for years, is always schedule a follow-up. After the event, you schedule a meeting with the client. And that is for a couple, and you can set it up as to see if there's any application needs, any questions, any additional solutions we can provide. And I put right on there, in future, training opportunities, learning opportunities, whatever you call what you do, but and schedule it before the event. So your event ends on the 20th. You're going to rest up that weekend and be ready to start planning next year. Let's schedule our meeting for Tuesday, because don't wait until after the event, because they're either exhausted or on vacation. So I think that also is a value add. Like, you can list that. What do you get when you book Melody as a speaker? You get this, and call that something, a strategic post-event planning, something like that, and it'll help you sell more. Period. Whatever your fees are.
And somebody once told me, and I haven't done this yet, but it's on my to-do list. That's like Santa's, Christmas list. To put, like, on the keynote page on your website, keynote on change. Clients who booked this also often booked resilience workshop, workshop on difficult conversations, and putting those relevant things in there, so that they can kind of see. That's my other favorite reason to do the 3-tier pricing in proposals that I write for myself, because then I can stuff in there, so at least they have a menu that they can work with. Even if they don't take any of those tiers, they see all the options like listed out. So it's kind of a nice way on something they're actually going to read.
Yeah, you guys, I want to jump in here with a question from Joni, Arizona represent. Joni, do you just want me to unmute you and you can ask your question, or do you want me to read it?
No, either or.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I've been asked to speak in Paris next year. But I didn't know, I have a set fee, but I didn't know whether you put on a percentage because it's international. Do you put the percentage on for your lodging, airfare, and your speaking, or is it just, again, one flat fee?
Well, we talked about flat travel fees earlier, so you can grab the
Sorry,
I came in that. But I will increase for international. My just travel fee goes up to, depends on where it is, 2,500 or 3,000. And that works just fine. Gets me across the pond and we're good.
But as far as the rest of your fee, I think it's also very smart to put domestic. Like, if you do a travel allowance and it's $1,500 domestic travel allowance, I like that for 2 reasons. 1, I think that it's clear, and 2, I think it makes you sound global, which makes you seem higher end. And then as far as if you want to charge more for going to Paris, I haven't had the opportunity yet, but I did get to present in Hawaii, and I have to tell you, I've never been more negotiable in my entire existence between you and me.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think that, but you could decide. I mean, I do have some speakers who do more global. And so they do have a markup, if you will. We don't call it that. We just call it international bookings are, X and domestic is Y. You certainly could do that. And I think if you're thinking you might be doing more international, I would think that through. And if not, if you're like, no, the great news is I have the same fee, whether it's domestic or international, great. But if you feel like you've got two numbers for that, that's okay too. I would just have it written down and I'd be able to articulate it.
I love it. Thank you, ladies.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because some
And
speakers
Steve?
will be like, you don't need to pay me anything. I'll go to Paris, just cover all the costs. And some speakers are like, no, you need to pay way, way more because I'm going to be gone for 3 or 4 days. And so
Right.
there's no right answer, right? It's what your goal is in terms of making money, in terms of traveling, in terms of being home, and all of those pieces. Yep.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you, everybody.
I paid for a one-on-one coaching session with a woman who I just put her information in the chat to talk about international stuff. She used to be on a bureau. She's a speaker. She's awesome. And so I would check out her stuff. She's got a whole bunch of resources online, so you wouldn't have to pay for a one-on-one, but she was incredibly valuable that time that I had with her.
That's cool that you got to do one-on-one. Yeah, she's a great LinkedIn follow, as well as both of these folks, Lynn and Ann, but Maria's great content on LinkedIn. Catherine.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks, Joni. Good to see you or hear you.
All right. Question that came to me as we were talking about make sure they know all of what you do. This question is more along the lines of what do you think about niching down? I mean, we always hear that classic expression, the riches are in the niches. So, but there's also that element of, are you no one is a unidimensional person. I think we all can speak to a lot of things on a lot of different topics. So I don't want to go too extreme with examples like we talk about everything, because then that's not realistic either. But if you're just the normal person that has expertise in a few different areas, is that confusing in terms of brand recognition, or is that okay?
Lynn, you want to start with this one?
Well, I think the answer is yes, it's confusing, and yes, it's okay. I think that
so much less confusing now.
There you go.
Right? I know. Well, because I agree with you. Like some really good speakers, like I have some amazing speakers who are just good speakers. Like they're like, give me a day and I could speak on just about anything, right? Like I could AI something. I could come up with. I've had lots of life, so I can speak on a lot of things. But there's also speakers who make a ton of money by speaking to the tiniest, most specific niche in the whole wide world, and they can be successful there too. But I do think if your goal, again, rule number one of sales, make it easy for people to buy from you. I do think the broader your topic, it is harder to sell as you're getting started. I think there's building up traction, and unless you're like been on TV or, you were one of Oprah's favorite things in March or something. If you don't already have all of that traction and you're building up your brand, I do think it's better to be really, really good at a couple of things and be crystal clear. That's one of the things we see a lot of new speakers who are like, we'll ask, what's your topic? They're like, well, resilience and leadership and communication and, the most generic topics. And that works well if you're relying on your friends to refer you to jobs like people you worked with before. Mm-hmm. But if you really want to generate those bigger topics, you do need to get more structured. I personally don't think you have to be in just one niche. And I think too often people on their speaker one pages, they think it's like a CV or a resume, and they'll be like, I had 3 years in, forestry and 2 years in healthcare. And people don't care about, like, if you're going across the board for like leadership or change, something like that, I do think you want to keep it broader. But the broader your appeal, then you just have to be careful about it, because I think it can be confusing. I'd rather you're really, really a rock star on a couple of very specific things when you get started, and then extend it. So it's okay to say what else is on your to-do list, what else can we help you with, and then extend that offering.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I put a book in the chat, The Referable Speaker. Michael Port and Andrew Davis have a very specific view. They have one way they think it should be done. So recognize there's 8,000 other ways. and they go through why niching works and why it's great.
Sure.
I personally never did it, and it's working out great. I mean, I did from a topic standpoint. I didn't from an industry standpoint. So, I mean, again, it's one of those, you make your own rules, you figure out how you want to do it, and you go for it. And again, like Steve said, I know a lot of people who've done really well in a very narrow industry and just went deep in it, and everybody knew them, and they were the, there's a woman, I can't remember her name, but she's the admin assistant person. And she speaks to admin assistants all over the US, and she's very successful just at that. And she's very good at just at that. So I mean, it's how you want to do it, but they make a really good case for niching in that referable speaker book.
Yeah, I love how they do kind of the fractals and kind of how you grow.
Yes.
It is really a good read for sure.
And it makes your outreach and your marketing a lot easier too, because you're like,
Absolutely.
I love credit unions. I've thought of niching to credit unions because I've done a ton of work for credit unions, and it's always so fun. They are energized, they're excited, and they're awesome. And I like everybody else too.
You like every audience. Let's we have just time. Let's one more question. Sherry, why don't you ask your question, then we'll kind of wrap up there. If you haven't figured it out by now, I like to start and end on time. So whether that's a flaw or a good thing, either way, but that is what we'll do. So Sherry, why don't you kick us to the final question?
Okay, I think this is a quick question, and it's silly, but you're here, so I'm going to go with it. Now that my wheels are spinning around this whole workshop thing, what I've been calling myself a speaker, coach, and consultant. What should I be calling myself? If I really do, I love doing workshops, and I've never really considered the whole keynote thing, at least at this point. So do I call myself a workshop facilitator? Sounds kind of cheesy, like it's kind of limiting, and maybe that's why I was limiting myself in my mind. But speaker also seems like it's misleading in some ways because I'm not really a keynote speaker. Again, at this point,
we use the word trainer. People who are trainer, facilitator,
okay,
implies workshop. But we also, and I know coaching and consulting are two different things, but I think to most non-professional coaches and consultants, they think they're the same. I know that people who are strong in one or the other, but also the human brain processes three, people like things in threes. So being able to say, you're a keynote speaker, a trainer, and a coach or consultant, that would be my recommendation.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'll let you wrap it up. I know you're uncomfortable right now, Steve.
Well, I'm not uncomfortable. If it was 359, I'd be uncomfortable. Sure.
I'm going to go back to that fourth tier about Anne. If you want the fourth tier, I wear pants. That's right. The part I want to do.
Well, we will wrap it up there. I mean, Lynn and Anne, I mean, obviously, you guys are a wealth of information, and they are doing this just out of the abundance of their heart, just to be to kind of bless all of us with all of their information. So this is fantastic. Seriously, thank you so much. I do recommend connecting with both of them through LinkedIn or the links that they put on the website. Fantastic stuff. And just, I'll put this recording, and I forgot to start it right away, so I think we missed Anne's intro. Sorry, Anne. But I'll put the recording out. I'll put the link out in the master document. If you have any problem getting into that or anything else, just reach out to me. You can always just text me, email me, whatever. And then I did just put out the survey for the date availability for July. So take a look at that and kind of cast your votes for what works best for you. And then I'm working on who's going to be our guest for the next one. We've got the survey results on the primary topics that you guys are concerned about. And so we'll find some great experts for that as well. But feel free to reach out with any questions. But Anne, Lynn, thank you. Everybody that joined, thank you. Karen, good to see you. I know it's late.
Thank you so much.
Oh, good. I'm glad it was
everybody.
helpful. All right. Take care,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Thanks,
Bye.
Steve. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Bye.